I'm Nora Whitmore, and I'm 33. 6 months ago, I spent nearly 16 hours traveling to my younger sister's wedding, only to have my parents stop me at the entrance. "This ceremony is for invited family," my mother said. "You need to go." I was standing there in the dress I had bought 6 weeks earlier, holding the gift I had wrapped the night before in my hotel room. My mother's expression didn't change even once. There was no regret in it, no hesitation, just a decision that I was not welcome. The worst part was that I had signed every vendor agreement for the wedding. My name was on all of them. So was my credit card. I had paid the deposits months earlier without questioning it. 4 days after she sent me away, my mother called. She wasn't calling to apologize. She was calling about the remaining bill, $38,900, and the answer I gave her was not what she expected. Before I continue, take a second to like this story and subscribe, but only if you truly enjoy this kind of retelling. Also, tell me where you're listening from and what time it is there. I always like seeing how far these stories travel. Now let me take you back to last November, when my sister first announced that she was engaged. It was a rainy Tuesday evening in Dublin. I was sitting near my apartment window when my phone rang with a video call from Lily, my younger sister. She was 25, had just graduated, and still lived about 12 minutes from our parents in Millbrook, Kentucky. I answered, and Lily's face immediately filled the screen. She was grinning so widely that I knew something had happened. Behind her, I could see our mother, Patricia, setting plates along the kitchen counter. "I have news," Lily cried, lifting her left hand toward the camera. "Owen proposed last night at the orchard. It was perfect." I felt real happiness for her. "Lily, that's wonderful. Congratulations." "Thank you. Owen's family is already celebrating. The Harrows even offered us their event barn. Can you believe it?" I knew the Harrows. Everyone in Millbrook did. They owned the biggest farm equipment dealerships in 4 counties. Owen was their youngest son, well-mannered, attractive, and raised with plenty of money. "Mom, say hello to Nora," Lily said, turning the phone. Patricia leaned into view. She smiled, but there was something restrained about it. "Hi, sweetheart. Exciting news, isn't it?" "It really is," I said. "I'll start checking flights. When are you setting the date?" My mother paused. She glanced toward Lily before looking back at the screen. "Don't spend a fortune flying here. It's going to be a small wedding." "It's Lily's wedding. Of course I'm coming." "Well, we'll see," Patricia replied. "There is a lot to organize, so I'll let Lily explain everything." She moved out of the frame. Lily stayed on the call for another 10 minutes, talking about flowers, colors, and possible decorations. I listened, smiled, and wrote notes, but I couldn't shake the uneasy feeling that had settled in my stomach. It was the first reason I'd had to return home in 3 years. I should have noticed how determined my mother was to make sure I didn't. 3 weeks later, Patricia called me herself. It was Wednesday afternoon in Dublin, which meant it was still morning in Kentucky. She had clearly been thinking about the matter since she woke up. "Nora, I need to ask you about something practical." "All right." "The venue wants a credit card attached to the reservation. Your father and I don't have much available credit after refinancing the house, and Lily has just graduated. She doesn't have enough history yet." I leaned back in my chair. I already knew where the conversation was going. "The caterer needs the same arrangement," she continued. "So do the florist and photographer. There are 4 contracts altogether. We only need someone with a strong credit record to sign them. You'd be helping your sister tremendously." "How much would the contracts be?" "About $42,500 altogether, but the deposit is only $3,600. The rest isn't charged until after the wedding." $42,500 under my name. "Mom, that's a huge obligation." "You're not giving them $42,000. Your name is simply going on the agreements. We'll handle the balances after the ceremony. I promise." I had heard that promise before. When I was 21, I co-signed a car loan for my father. It took me 2 years to get it removed from my credit history. When I was 27, I sent Patricia $4,500 for what she said was an emergency furnace repair. Later, I found out the money had gone toward Lily's tuition. Still, this was my sister's wedding. I was the older daughter, the one with the stable job, the reliable credit, and the Dublin salary. "All right," I said, "send me everything." I told myself that helping was simply what families did. The contracts arrived that week. I signed all 4 without reading the fine print as carefully as I should have. During the months that followed, I watched the wedding come together from a distance. Lily created a group message called Harrow Wedding Circle. I wasn't included. I only learned about it because she accidentally forwarded me a picture meant for everyone else. It showed several bridesmaid dresses with the message, "Help us choose, everyone." I wasn't part of everyone. I called Lily more than once to ask about the dress code, the seating plan, and whether she wanted me to give a toast. The first time, she said she would get back to me. The next time, she allowed the call to go to voicemail and sent a message later. "I'm drowning in wedding details. We'll talk soon." I called my mother and asked if there was anything else she needed me to do. "Everything is under control," Patricia said. "You don't need to worry about anything." I never received an invitation. There wasn't a printed card or an electronic one, but I convinced myself that this was normal. I was Lily's sister. Surely sisters didn't need formal invitations. Family was supposed to be included automatically. 10 days before the ceremony, Lily posted a picture on social media. It was from the rehearsal dinner at a restaurant in Millbrook. She was wearing a cream-colored dress and standing among her bridesmaids. Patricia stood beside her, smiling proudly. The caption said, "My family, my whole heart." I stared at the picture for several minutes. I wasn't in it. I hadn't been invited to the dinner. I nearly called them. I almost asked why. Instead, I made excuses on their behalf. Maybe the dinner was only for the wedding party. Maybe they assumed I couldn't arrive early. Maybe I was making something out of nothing. The next morning, I set my alarm and got ready to leave. I had requested a full week away from work. I only received 18 vacation days a year, and this trip used 5 of them. My round-trip flight from Dublin through Atlanta to Louisville cost $1,280. 4 nights at the Pinecrest Lodge, the only respectable hotel in Millbrook, cost $640. The stand mixer Lily had once mentioned wanting cost $730. Before I had even reached Kentucky, I had spent $2,650. During the first part of the flight, somewhere over the Atlantic, I opened the notes on my phone. I had been working on a toast for weeks. It was supposed to last about a minute and a half. I wanted to tell the story of Lily playing wedding with her stuffed animals when she was 6. She always assigned me the role of the officiant. I was never allowed to be the bride. I thought people would find it funny. I practiced the toast twice, quietly speaking into my coat sleeve so the passenger beside me wouldn't think I was talking to myself. During the layover in Atlanta, I sent Patricia a message. "Just landed in Atlanta. 1 more flight, then I'll see everyone." She didn't answer for nearly half an hour. Just before I boarded the connection to Louisville, her reply appeared. "Busy today. See you tomorrow." There was no exclamation mark, no safe travel message, nothing that suggested she was glad I was coming. I looked at the message while the gate agent called the next boarding group. I almost sent a screenshot to my friend Mia in Dublin and asked whether it sounded strange or whether I was imagining things. I didn't. I put my phone away, boarded the plane, and told myself everything would feel different once I arrived. 16 hours of travel, 1 cold message in return. I reached the Pinecrest Lodge at 8:45 on Friday night. The woman at the desk smiled and asked whether I was there for the Harrow Whitmore wedding. Apparently, the entire town knew about it. "Yes," I said. "How nice. Are you a friend of the family?" Something like that. My room was small but clean. I hung my dark green dress in the closet, then placed the wrapped mixer on the desk. I called Lily. The phone rang 4 times before switching to voicemail. Then I messaged Patricia. "I've checked in. What time should I come to the venue tomorrow?" An hour later, she responded. "Ceremony 1:30. That was all. No invitation to come early, no suggestion that we have breakfast, no message from my father saying he wanted to see me. I sat on the edge of the bed and looked at my reflection across the room. I had traveled 16 hours. I had spent almost $2,700. I had signed contracts totaling $42,500, and my mother couldn't spare more than 2 words for me. The last time I had been in Kentucky was 3 years earlier, for my grandmother's funeral. Patricia had barely spoken to me then. She spent the service whispering with Lily and greeting people from town. At the reception, someone asked how many children she had. "Just Lily," Patricia answered. I was standing only a few steps away with a plate in my hand. That night, I ironed my dress as if I were preparing for an interview. In a way, I was auditioning for a place in my own family. I set my alarm for 8 and turned off the light, but sleep wouldn't come. The room next door was occupied by a couple watching a game show at full volume. Still, the noise wasn't what kept me awake. It was the calculation. The $2,650 I had spent getting there. The $38,900 still waiting on my credit card. 7 years of sending money whenever Patricia called with another emergency, the broken boiler, Lily's insurance payment, overdue property taxes. I had never totaled it. I was afraid of what the number would say. But that night, I added up something else. The calls that never came. The birthdays when Patricia sent a brief "happy birthday" near midnight, or forgot altogether. The Christmas when I tried to video call the family and nobody answered because they were at the Ellisons' holiday gathering, a gathering they had never mentioned to me. The framed graduation pictures on my mother's mantle, 4 of Lily, none of me. If I kept paying, traveling, and pretending their indifference didn't hurt, what would disappear first? It wouldn't be my money, it would be me. I would become the woman who paid for her own place at the holiday table and still ended up sitting with the children. The person who wrote the checks and was mentioned only in the fine print. Even then, I chose to hope one more time. Maybe Patricia was simply overwhelmed. Maybe Lily was buried in last-minute preparations. Maybe, when I arrived, my mother would finally hug me and say she was happy I had come. Maybe. I set the alarm and told myself, this is the last time I go looking for something they have never willingly given me. The next day would answer the question. Sleep came eventually, but not easily. On Saturday afternoon, shortly before 1:15, I drove to Willow Ridge Farm, a 14-acre property just outside Millbrook. White rails bordered the pasture, strings of bulbs hung between the maple trees, and a gravel walkway led toward the entrance between jars filled with wildflowers. The place looked perfect. I parked the rental car near the back of the lot. A few dozen vehicles were already there, trucks, family sedans, and several expensive sport utility vehicles that made it obvious which family had paid for the celebration. Guests moved toward the barn in small groups, carrying programs and talking among themselves. I adjusted my dress, lifted the gift, and started up the path. I saw my father first. Alan was standing near the double doors in a rented suit that didn't fit him properly. He was shaking hands with an older man from the Harrow family. When he noticed me, the smile disappeared from his face. His eyes widened, moved toward me, then dropped to the ground. He didn't wave. He didn't approach. He turned around and went inside. I kept walking. When I was only a few steps from the entrance, the doors opened and Patricia came out. She was dressed in pale gold silk, with her hair styled and her makeup carefully done. Her hands were folded in front of her. She stopped directly in my way. "Nora." "Hi, Mom. I made it." She didn't move closer. "What are you doing here?" "I came to Lily's wedding." "You need to leave, immediately." For a moment, I wasn't sure I had heard her correctly. "Why? I flew all this way." "Lower your voice. People are looking." "I'm your daughter." Patricia stepped closer, close enough for me to recognize the perfume she had worn for most of my life. "Only invited relatives are going inside," she said quietly. "You weren't invited." I stood there with the gift in my hands. "Not invited? I'm the person who signed the vendor agreements. I paid the deposits." "This isn't about the money," she replied. "It's about what is appropriate." "Appropriate?" "Nora, don't make this embarrassing for everyone." Through the partly open door behind her, I could see rows of white chairs, greenery hanging from the beams, and the musicians preparing near the front. Everything inside had been arranged under contracts bearing my name. Alan appeared in the doorway. He looked at Patricia, then at me, and then lowered his head. His hands disappeared into his pockets. He said nothing. A woman's voice came from inside the barn. "Patricia, who is out there? Is everything all right?" My mother immediately changed her expression. Her shoulders straightened, and a pleasant smile appeared before she turned toward the voice. The woman who stepped outside was Celia Harrow, Owen's mother. She wore a lavender dress and a string of pearls. She looked at me with the open curiosity of someone who had no idea why I was standing there. "Patricia, is there a problem?" Patricia's voice became warm. "No problem at all, Celia. This is just a relative from out of town who came to the wrong place. These things happen when the guest list gets complicated." "A relative?" Celia studied my face. "I thought you had only one daughter." The pause that followed was brief, but it felt much longer. Patricia gave a brittle little laugh. "I do. Nora is a cousin who lives out of state. She must have misunderstood the schedule." Celia's expression changed slightly. She glanced at me again, then touched Patricia's arm. "The ceremony begins in a few minutes. We should come inside." She went back through the doors. I looked at my mother. She looked back at me. There was no apology in her face, no shame, no sign that she regretted what she had done. There was only fear. "A cousin?" I asked. "You told her I'm your cousin?" "Please, Nora. You told them you have only one daughter. It isn't simple. You wouldn't understand. How long have you been telling people I don't exist?" Patricia didn't answer. Instead, she looked toward the parking area as if wishing I would disappear. That was when I understood. I hadn't been accidentally left off the guest list. She had removed me from the story, and she had probably been doing it for years. Part of me wanted to walk through those doors anyway. I imagined standing in front of Celia, Owen, Lily, and every guest and saying exactly who I was, that I was Patricia's oldest daughter, that my signature paid for the flowers and food, and that the music playing inside had been charged to my card. But I didn't do it. I looked at the decorated barn. I looked at my father standing just inside the doorway, still refusing to meet my eyes. Then I looked at Patricia, who remained between me and the entrance. I bent down and placed the gift on the stone step. "Keep it," I said. "It's for Lily." Patricia's shoulders loosened slightly. She thought the confrontation was ending. "Thank you, Nora. I really—" "Stop." I raised one hand. "Don't explain this. Don't try to defend it. I heard what you said." Then I turned around. I walked past the flower-filled jars, past the arriving guests, and back toward the rental car. Once I was inside, I closed the door and cried. Not loudly. I had spent so long being told not to create problems that even alone in a parking lot, I kept the sound to myself. I stayed there for several minutes. Then, through the open windows of the car, I heard the quartet begin the processional music. The ceremony had started. I turned on the engine and drove away. In the mirror, Willow Ridge Farm grew smaller until it was gone. I didn't slam anything. I didn't yell. I simply left. And for the first time, leaving felt stronger than staying. I know some of you are probably wondering why I didn't expose everything right there in front of the guests. I wondered the same thing all the way back to the hotel. But honestly, what would you have done if your own mother had looked at you and introduced you as a cousin? Tell me in the comments. And if you've ever experienced something similar, tap the like button. It helps more than you might think. Now, back to what happened next. I drove to the Pinecrest Lodge without really paying attention to the road. Once inside, I kicked off my shoes and sat on the bed, still wearing the dress, with yesterday's makeup beginning to smudge. The toast I had written was still open on my phone. I closed it without reading it. Then I opened my laptop. There were 4 emails from the vendors, all sent during the previous 2 weeks. I had only skimmed them before. This time, I read every line. The Willow Ridge Farm Agreement listed me as the contract holder. Deposit paid, $1,300. Remaining balance, $15,100. Due within 5 business days after the event. Harvest Table Catering. Deposit, $950. Remaining balance, $12,900. Fern and Finch Floral. Deposit, $750. Remaining balance, $6,400. North Star Photography. Deposit, $600. Remaining balance, $4,500. The deposits totaled $3,600. The unpaid balances came to $38,900. My name, my card information, and my electronic signature were attached to every agreement. Each contract had been written the same way: deposit first, final payment after the wedding. I closed the computer and sat there. By then, the reception was probably underway. Patricia was likely embracing Lily. Owen was dancing with his new wife. The Harrows were raising glasses with my parents. All of it was happening under paperwork that listed me as responsible. I didn't call anyone that night. I didn't send angry messages. I simply sat on the bed while the number repeated in my head. $38,900. Their wedding. My liability. At about 9:15, my phone rang. The caller was Aunt Helen. Helen Mercer was my mother's older sister. She was 60, retired from being a high school principal, and had never been good at pretending. Patricia called her difficult. Most people called her honest. "Nora, where are you?" Helen asked. "I didn't see you at the wedding." I went there. "I just wasn't allowed inside." "What do you mean?" I told her everything: the blocked entrance, Patricia's demand that I leave, the claim that only family was welcome, and the lie that I was a cousin. Helen didn't speak for a while. I could hear her taking slow breaths as she decided how much anger to let into her voice. "She told them you weren't her daughter?" "She told Celia she had only one daughter." Good grief. After another pause, Helen continued. "At the reception, your mother gave a toast. She said, and I remember the words exactly, 'Our little family, Alan, me, and Lily.' She introduced the Whitmores that way." I closed my eyes. "I sat there thinking something was wrong," Helen said. "I almost corrected her. I should have." "This isn't your fault." "No, it isn't. It's Patricia's, and she is going to answer for it." Helen's voice hardened. "Those wedding contracts, whose name is on them?" "Mine." "All 4? "All 4. She went quiet again. When she spoke, she sounded less like an angry aunt and more like someone planning her next move. "Then listen carefully. Your mother told an entire room that you weren't part of the family. You don't owe that room a cent." The next morning, Lily uploaded a set of wedding pictures to social media. There were 12 images. The first showed Lily and Owen at the front of the barn. The next was a family portrait with Alan, Patricia, Lily, Owen, Celia, and Martin Harrow. Everyone who was supposed to be there, except me. The caption read, "With everyone who makes our lives complete, #Harrow at last." I looked at it more than once before opening my email. The invoices had arrived overnight. They were cheerful, automatic messages with the venue's logo at the top. "Thank you for celebrating with us. Your remaining balance of $15,100 is due Thursday, February 13th. The other 3 invoices had arrived as well. Each one was addressed to Nora Whitmore. Each one gave the same deadline. The total was $38,900. I looked back at Lily's caption, "Everyone who makes our lives complete." Then I looked at the bills. Something inside me changed. It wasn't an explosion. It was more like a latch finally releasing after being stuck for years. I wasn't furious yet. The anger would come later, in the middle of the night, in the shower, during work meetings when I couldn't concentrate. That morning, I felt something much simpler. I understood. I was the only person paying for the wedding. I was the one person missing from the pictures. And I was the person receiving the invoices for an event I had been removed from. Something was going to change, and this time, it would not be me sacrificing more. That afternoon, Lily left me a voicemail instead of calling. I pressed play. "Hey Nora, the wedding was incredible. Everything at the farm looked beautiful, and Owen's family was so kind. I'm sorry yesterday turned awkward. Mom said it was probably better that way, and I think she may be right. Explaining everything would have been difficult. Anyway, thank you for handling the vendor arrangements. You really are the best big sister. Let's talk soon, okay? Love you." I listened to it twice. She didn't say she was sorry for letting Patricia stop me. She didn't say she should have defended me. She didn't say she had been unaware. Instead, she said the situation had been awkward and thanked me for paying. Mom said it was better this way. That told me Lily had known before the wedding. She knew I might be turned away and she had accepted it. She might even have helped arrange it. I used to love being called the best big sister. It made me believe that my sacrifices mattered. But sitting alone in that hotel room, I heard the phrase differently. Lily used it when she needed something. Only then. I didn't return the call or send a message. I placed my phone on the nightstand and looked at the ceiling. The invoices were due Thursday. My family had told about 100 people that I wasn't part of them. My sister had left me a message that amounted to, "Thank you for paying." I had until Thursday to decide what I was willing to do. That evening, after the room next door had gone quiet, I opened my laptop and searched for information about responsibility for vendor agreements signed on behalf of someone else's event. The information I found was consistent. The person named on the contract carries the legal obligation, but that person also controls the payment authorization. I could approve the remaining charges, or I could refuse them. I could ask the vendors to bill the people who had actually hosted the event. So I called Willow Ridge Farm. After 3 rings, someone answered. "Willow Ridge, this is Marissa." "Hi, Marissa. My name is Nora Whitmore. I'm listed as the contract holder for Saturday's Harrow Whitmore wedding." "Yes, Ms. Whitmore. It was a lovely event. How can I help?" "I need to notify you that I am not approving the final charge on that agreement. I wasn't allowed to attend the event, so I'm requesting that the unpaid balance be billed to the hosts instead." There was a pause. "I'll need to send this to our manager. May I ask whether there is a dispute?" "No dispute. I'm simply withdrawing my authorization. Please direct the invoice to Patricia and Alan Whitmore in Millbrook." Marissa took my email address, repeated the request back to me, and said someone would respond the next morning. I made the same call to Harvest Table Catering, then Fern and Finch, and finally North Star Photography. 4 conversations, less than 15 minutes. I didn't shout. I didn't threaten anyone. I didn't explain the family history. I repeated the same calm answer each time. No, I was not authorizing the charge. When I finished, I closed the laptop, brushed my teeth, and slept through the night for the first time in 2 days. On Monday morning, I changed my flight. I had planned to remain in Kentucky until Wednesday, but I booked the earliest seat back to Dublin, leaving at 6:15 through Atlanta. I packed quickly and checked out of the Pinecrest Lodge before sunrise. The same woman was working at the front desk. "How was the wedding?" she asked with a smile. "Memorable," I replied. The drive to Louisville took about 2 hours. I passed through Millbrook one final time. The diner was just opening. The hardware store was still dark. The church where I had been baptized at 13 stood beside the road. Then I drove past the house where I grew up. The porch light was on. I could imagine Patricia sitting at the kitchen table with coffee, still enjoying the excitement of the reception. Alan was probably reading the morning paper. The house would be full of leftover cake and congratulatory cards, and no one would mention me. When I was 10, Patricia had told me, "You're the older sister. You have to stay strong for Lily." I had carried that instruction for 23 years. I stayed strong through Lily's childhood illness and the meningitis scare that changed the way our family treated her. I stayed strong through every financial emergency, every unanswered message, and every holiday I spent alone in Dublin, while pretending the time difference was the reason I felt far away. I turned onto the highway and didn't look back. About 16 hours later, I arrived at Dublin Airport. The sky was gray and wet, and I had never been so happy to see rain. When I switched on my phone, there were no missed calls and no messages. Nobody in Millbrook had checked whether I got home safely, but I knew the calls would come soon. The vendors would contact my family by Tuesday. The revised invoices would appear by Wednesday. I was right. On Tuesday afternoon in Dublin, my phone rang. It was Patricia. I let it ring a few times before answering. "Hello, darling," she said in the light, gentle voice she used whenever she wanted something. "How was the flight?" "Fine." "Good. The venue called me this morning. They said you withdrew your payment authorization. The unpaid bill is $38,900. What are we supposed to do?" "You're supposed to pay it." There was a pause. "I'm sorry?" "I canceled the authorization because I wasn't invited to the event." "Nora, don't be dramatic. This was a misunderstanding. We can discuss it. You told Celia Harrow I was a distant relative. You told her Lily was your only daughter. That wasn't a misunderstanding. You made a choice." The softness disappeared from her voice. "After everything I've done for you, this is how you repay me? You raised me, and I'm grateful for that. You also stood at a wedding entrance and told a stranger I wasn't your daughter. Both facts can be true. You're making this much bigger than it is. $38,900 is exactly how big it is. Your father is under enormous stress. His blood pressure is already high. If something happens to him, you'll have to live with that. Dad was standing beside you. He chose not to say anything." She didn't answer. I continued, "You said I wasn't family, so the family's wedding bill belongs to the family." The call ended. She hung up without another word. I placed the phone on the counter and looked at it. My hands were steady. My pulse was normal. The apartment was quiet, properly quiet for the first time in months. Patricia called again about half an hour later. This time there was no sweetness in her voice. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" "Yes." "The venue is contacting me. The caterer is contacting me. They are forwarding invoices to my email with your name removed and mine added. Do you know how humiliating that is? I imagine it feels similar to being called a cousin at your own daughter's wedding. That is not the same thing." "You're right. Your humiliation comes with a $38,900 bill. I raised you. I fed you. I took you to school every day. And now you're going to destroy this family over one misunderstanding?" "It wasn't a misunderstanding." "Fine. You want to behave this way? I'll tell everyone in town what kind of daughter abandons her family over money. Tell them, I'd rather be the daughter you criticize than the daughter you pretend never existed." That stopped her. "You don't mean that," she said much more quietly. "I do." She was silent for a moment. Then she reached for the threat she had used many times before. "Your father could have a heart attack because of this. If he goes to the hospital, that will be on you." There it was again, my father's health used as a weapon. She had used it when I moved to Dublin, when I missed holidays, and when I stopped sending money without being asked. "Dad's health belongs between him and his doctor," I said. "It doesn't belong between me and my credit card." She ended the call again. This time I didn't stare at the phone. I put water on for tea. By Wednesday, Patricia had activated what I privately called the family phone tree. Every relative seemed to have been given a turn. Lily called first. She was crying heavily. "Nora, please. Owen and I just got married. We don't have $38,900. If you refuse to pay, we'll have to. We're trying to begin our life together, and you're making it impossible. Did you know Mom told the Harrows I didn't exist?" Lily sniffed and went quiet. "Mom thought it would make things less uncomfortable," she finally said. "The Harrows are traditional, and you live overseas and you're not married. She thought explaining everything would be too complicated. It wasn't meant to be personal. It was just easier. You knew before the wedding. I didn't think she would actually stop you at the door. But you didn't stop her." Lily began crying again. "Can we please deal with the bill? Owen's parents keep asking us questions. Then maybe they deserve honest answers." She ended the call. My father called that afternoon. He almost never called me. Usually, he sent short emails about the weather or local sports scores. Hearing his voice felt unfamiliar. "Nora, your mother is extremely upset." "I know. Could you be willing to compromise? For the family?" "Dad, did you know she told people I wasn't her daughter?" He let out a long breath. "That isn't exactly what happened." "Were you standing there when she called me a distant relative?" He said nothing. "Dad?" The line went dead. He had hung up. All of them ended the conversation as soon as I asked a direct question. I was beginning to understand the pattern. This was a family that would rather protect silence than face the truth. Aunt Helen didn't wait for anyone's permission. On Thursday morning, the day the vendors expected payment, she called Celia Harrow directly. She had found the number in the wedding program she had kept in her purse. I wasn't on the call. Helen told me about it afterward. "Celia, this is Helen Mercer. I'm Patricia Whitmore's older sister. We met briefly at the reception." "Yes, Helen, how can I help?" "There is something you need to know. Patricia has 2 daughters, not 1. Celia paused. "The older daughter is Nora. She's 33, lives in Dublin, and works in software. She signed every vendor contract for Lily's wedding, every one of them. On Saturday, Patricia stopped her outside and ordered her to leave." According to Helen, Celia said nothing for several seconds. "I'm sorry, what?" The woman Patricia introduced as a distant relative was her firstborn daughter. Nora traveled 16 hours to attend, paid the deposits herself, and was turned away because Patricia had told your family the Whitmores had only 1 child. Celia's voice became colder. "Why would Patricia do that?" "That is something you will have to ask her. I can only tell you that Nora paid for the event, was treated like a stranger, and still left without causing a scene. That was more dignity than my sister showed her." Celia thanked Helen and said she needed to make several calls. Then she ended the conversation. Millbrook was a small town. Once that call happened, the truth was not going to stay contained. I hadn't asked Helen to intervene, but when she told me what she had done, I felt something I hadn't felt from my family in years. I felt recognized. For once, someone had said clearly, "What happened to you was wrong." Has anyone ever done that for you? Has someone ever broken the silence when everyone else chose to protect it? Tell me in the comments. And if you want to hear how the rest of this unfolded, subscribe. Now, back to the story. That afternoon, I sat at my desk in Dublin with a fresh cup of tea and closed every remaining account. I emailed all 4 vendors, Willow Ridge Farm, Harvest Table Catering, Fern and Finch, and North Star Photography. Each email said essentially the same thing. "I am the undersigned contract holder, Nora Whitmore, and I do not authorize any further charges to the card connected to this agreement. Please redirect all unpaid invoices to the Whitmore family of Millbrook, Kentucky, who hosted the event. Confirm when your records have been updated." All 4 vendors replied within the hour. They were polite, professional, and unsurprised by the request. Marissa from Willow Ridge wrote, "Understood, Ms. Whitmore. We have amended the account." I called my bank afterward, canceled the card connected to the agreements, and requested a replacement. The $38,900 in unpaid charges would now go to the people who had hosted the wedding. The $3,600 in deposits was already gone. They had been paid months earlier and could not be recovered. With the flights, hotel, and gift included, the entire experience had cost me $6,250. I sat with that number for a while. $6,250 was the price of learning that no amount of money, travel, signatures, or effort would earn me a place at a table where they had deliberately left no chair. Honestly, it was a reasonable price for that lesson. I closed the laptop, washed my mug, and walked beside the River Liffey. For the first time in years, I felt as if I had no unpaid obligation hanging over me. On Friday morning, I wrote one final email. The recipients were Patricia, Alan, and Lily Harrow. I wrote, "Patricia, Alan, and Lily, I have withdrawn my authorization from every vendor agreement connected to Lily's wedding. The outstanding balance of $38,900 is now your responsibility as the people who hosted the event. I will not discuss this matter further. I wish Lily and Owen a good marriage. Please do not contact me again about money. If any of you want a relationship with me, it will have to begin with honesty rather than another invoice. Nora." I reread the message several times. I checked for errors and removed anything that might sound spiteful. There was nothing cruel in it. It was simply a boundary. I pressed send. Then I made tea and stood beside the window of my apartment. It overlooked a small courtyard where a chestnut tree dropped leaves onto a neighbor's bicycle. The apartment wasn't impressive, but it belonged to me. I paid the rent. I had chosen everything inside it. No one there had ever told me that I didn't belong. For years, I had carried the same questions. Was I doing enough? Was I giving enough? If I sent more money, called more often, or flew home once more, would my family finally see me? Standing in my own kitchen with a cup of tea I had made for myself, I felt that weight begin to lift. I didn't send the email to punish them. I sent it because I needed to stop punishing myself. Helen continued to update me on what was happening in Millbrook. She claimed she was trying not to enjoy the fallout, but she was not convincing. Celia called Patricia that same afternoon. "You misled us," Celia said. Her voice wasn't loud. The Harrows didn't need to shout to make a point. "You told us you had one daughter. We welcomed your family into ours based on trust, and that trust is gone." Patricia tried to defend herself. "Nora and I have been estranged. It is a private family situation." "Estranged? Your daughter signed every agreement for the wedding. That isn't estrangement. That is taking advantage of her." Celia also made it clear that the Harrows would not pay the $38,900. "That obligation belongs to you and your vendors. We didn't sign those contracts. Apparently, you didn't either." That evening, Owen confronted Lily. Helen heard about it through the Harrow family. "You have a sister?" Owen asked. "A real sister? She paid for our entire wedding and your mother sent her away?" Lily cried. "It isn't that simple." "It is simple. Your family lied to mine on our wedding day." It became the newlyweds' first serious fight within the first week of their marriage. It was about a sister Owen hadn't known existed and a bill neither of them had expected. Lily and Owen eventually took out a personal loan for the $38,900. Celia and Martin helped guarantee it, not because they were feeling generous, but because their name was connected to the event and they didn't want the vendors pursuing them. The dream wedding now came with a monthly payment. In Millbrook, everyone knows your private business quickly, and by the next week, everyone has formed an opinion about it. The story traveled through the church, the diner, the school parent network, and the waiting room at the Harrow dealerships. The details changed slightly depending on who repeated them, but the main facts stayed intact. Patricia Whitmore had hidden her oldest daughter, refused to let her into the wedding, and then sent her the bill. Mara Ellis, Patricia's neighbor of 16 years, stopped her in the church parking lot after Sunday service. "Patricia, I never knew you had another daughter. How have I never met her?" Patricia used the explanation she had clearly prepared. "Nora lives abroad. We aren't as close as I wish we were. It's a painful subject." Mara nodded. "Helen tells it differently." Patricia stopped attending that church. She began going to a Methodist congregation in the next town, where no one knew her family history. Alan became even more withdrawn than usual. He stopped visiting the hardware store on Saturdays and no longer sat outside in the evenings. The people who saw him said he looked like someone carrying a burden he didn't know how to put down. Patricia blamed Helen. She called her one morning, her voice shaking. "You ruined this family." Helen later told me exactly what she said. "I didn't expose you. I only stopped hiding what you did." Patricia hung up and stopped speaking to her as well. The list of relatives Patricia refused to talk to kept growing. So did the damage to the perfect family image she had spent years protecting. No one had attacked it. It collapsed when the truth was finally spoken. 2 weeks after the wedding, Lily sent me a long message. I could almost hear her crying as I read it. "Nora, I'm sorry for everything. The whole situation became completely out of control. I swear I didn't know Mom was going to say those things to the Harrows. Owen is furious with me, and his parents barely talk to me now. The loan payments begin next month, and we're already struggling with the apartment deposit. I know this is a lot to ask, but could you pay some of the balance? Even half would help. I'll pay you back, I promise. You're my sister, and I love you. I just need help right now." I read the message during my lunch break. Then I read it again, and once more, looking for one particular sentence. An apology for letting Patricia turn me away, an admission that Lily had known, a simple acknowledgement that what happened at the entrance was wrong. None of that was there. The entire message focused on Lily's problems, Owen's anger, the loan, their apartment, and the Harrows' disappointment. My pain never appeared. It was an emergency report disguised as an apology. She was sorry about the consequences, not about what had been done to me. I answered carefully, "Lily, I'm sorry you're dealing with all of this, but I can't contribute financially. The line I drew isn't really about the money. It's about being treated as family instead of being erased whenever I become inconvenient. When you're ready to talk about that, not another bill, I'm willing to listen." I sent it, put my phone in a drawer, and returned to work. She didn't answer that day or the rest of the week. I wasn't surprised. She had never known how to relate to me when I wasn't solving a problem for her. A month after the wedding, I received an email from Alan. My father rarely wrote anything personal. He called only occasionally, and when he did, he discussed the weather or local sports. In all my years, he had never sent me more than a short birthday note. The subject line read, "From Dad." I opened it. "Nora, I should have spoken up at the barn. I didn't. I stood there while your mother dealt with you and kept my mouth shut. I have no good excuse. I was afraid of conflict, and that made me a coward. Your mother and I are working with the vendors on the balances. We don't need your money. I am writing because I want you to know that I'm sorry. I should have walked you inside. I will carry the fact that I didn't, Dad." I read it 5 times. I read it at my desk, on the tram ride home, and again on my sofa with the lights off. The email didn't repair everything. Alan still hadn't challenged Patricia. He hadn't demanded that she apologize or explained why he had spent so many years choosing peace over his daughter. But he had finally told me the truth. It was the first honest thing anyone in my immediate family had said since the wedding. I didn't answer immediately. I needed time. A week later, I replied, "Dad, thank you. You have no idea how much that means to me. I'm not ready to come home or act as if everything is normal, but I read your message and I will keep it. Nora." It was a short reply. I left the door open only a little, not enough for anyone to walk through without permission, but not completely closed either. He didn't respond. I hadn't expected him to. He had said what he needed to say, and I had heard him. 6 months have passed since that Saturday at Willow Ridge Farm. I was promoted to senior software engineer at the financial services company where I have worked for 3 years. My manager mentioned my ability to lead under pressure during my review. She had no idea what kind of pressure I had been carrying. I also began seeing a therapist, not only because of the wedding, but because of the 33 years before it. We have been working through something she calls over-responsibility, the belief that if I perform well enough, sacrifice enough, and carry enough, the people I love will finally recognize my worth. That belief powered every check I wrote, every flight I booked, and every time I said fine when I actually meant, that hurt me. I video call Helen every other Sunday. She drinks coffee, I drink tea, and we spend an hour talking about everything and nothing. She still tells me what is happening in Millbrook, not because she wants me caught up in the gossip, but because she doesn't want me surprised by anything. Patricia and Alan have paid $12,500 of the $38,900. They used part of their retirement savings. Lily and Owen are responsible for the rest through the loan they took out. The monthly payments have caused constant tension in their home. The Harrows remain polite but distant. Celia still hasn't forgiven Patricia. Lily and Owen are still married. Helen says they are attending counseling. Owen is a decent man who is trying, but their relationship began with a serious lie, and damage like that doesn't disappear quickly. Patricia hasn't called, emailed, or sent me a message. Helen says Patricia refers to what happened as Nora's tantrum. I suppose that is easier than admitting what it really was. I don't hate my mother. Therapy has helped me understand that. But I also refuse to pretend that her version of love didn't hurt me. It did. And acting as though it didn't was slowly destroying me, one signed agreement at a time. I'm not telling this story so you will hate Patricia. She is flawed and frightened. She built an image of a perfect family because the real one never felt good enough to her. Somewhere along the way, she decided I was the part that didn't belong in the picture. That doesn't excuse her. It is simply what happened. I also think part of growing older is accepting that the people who raised us are still just people. They make choices based on their fears, and sometimes those choices cause permanent damage. But I'm sharing this because maybe you recognize yourself in it. Maybe you're the person who travels across the world or keeps showing up emotionally to support people who never make room for you. Maybe you're the one signing the agreements, paying the expenses, swallowing the insults, and calling it love because you don't know what else to call it. I did that for years. I called it duty. I called it family. I called it being the bigger person. Every time I wrote another check, ignored another insult, or pretended an empty chair at the table didn't bother me, I gave away another piece of myself. A boundary is not revenge. It isn't punishment, and it isn't a weapon. It is the point where you decide that your life cannot keep costing you this much. Then you act accordingly. $38,900. That was the amount my family tried to leave me with, and I don't regret refusing to pay it. If you are always paying, financially, emotionally, or in every other way, for a place at a table where nobody made room for you, maybe it is time to build your own table. I didn't lose myself at Willow Ridge Farm. I finally stopped abandoning myself. Thank you for staying with me through the whole story. If you were in my position, would you have paid the $38,900 or drawn the line? Comment, pay, or boundary. I really do read the responses. And if this story connected with something real in your life, like the video and subscribe. There are more stories about family, boundaries, and finding your voice when the people closest to you try to silence it. There is another story in the description if you want to keep listening.